Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you got to meet some wonderful people during the networking break. Let us know in the chat how it went. Type it in, let us know. Again, you can use the platform to look up other attendees and our team to network, and you can set up a one-on-one chat today or at a later date. We totally want to facilitate networking. That is what we are all about. Before we jump into the next session, we would love to again thank all of our sponsors for their support and for all of you taking the time to join us. Our sponsors are Accenture, Alliant Insurance Services, American Bankers Association, Bunge, Diageo, FactSet, IPC Systems, Kinship, Lincoln Financial Group, Lanik, Mars Pet Nutrition, Mars Veterinary Health, Mutual of Omaha, New York Life, NFP, Planned Parenthood, Penny Finance, Plus Media Solutions, RBC Wealth Management US, Royal Canin, Thornburg Investment Management, and Verizon. Next up, we are going to take a look at the entrepreneurial landscape. With lots of women-owned businesses becoming unicorns lately, what should we expect for the funding and founding of minority-owned businesses? So you can welcome to the stage, we have Sunira Madani, the CEO and founder of Stacks. We have Ruchika Tulsian, the founder of Candor and author of Inclusion on Purpose. And we will have Lauren Malin, CEO of Digital Undivided. She is on her way right now. We're just figuring things out, but we're going to start out with Sunira and Ruchika.
Hi, Megan. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you who are joining us today. Sunira, I'm so excited to be in conversation with you. And I know Lauren's going to join us very shortly. Sunira, I can't see you, just if you want to check in on your video. But just to welcome everyone today, just wanted to talk a little bit about today's panel. I'm Ruchika Tulsian. Indeed, I am an author. I'm also the founder of Candor and Inclusion Strategy Practice. But a part of me that I don't talk about nearly enough, and I'm really excited to be on this panel, is I'm actually also an investor. I've invested in women, and especially women of color founded companies for a number of years. I'm also a limited partner at Graham & Walker, which is a women-focused VC fund. So just to sort of level set before I introduce Sunira, women founded companies received 3% of VC funding in 2019 and down to 2.2% in 2020. The good news is the 2021 numbers, although frustratingly small, show some improvement. In fact, PitchBook report from November found that female-founded companies raised $40.4 billion across 2,661 deals through the first 3 quarters of 2021. And that's actually much higher than the previous deal record of 2019. So what do these deals mean for the startup landscape, for the cities where they're based? What happens if you're not in one of those centers of where deals are usually known to happen, such as Silicon Valley or New York? So I'm really excited to introduce today's panelists to talk more about this. We'll start with Sunira, a super inspiring story. Sunira is the CEO and founder of Stacks. What many people may not know about her is that when Sunira pitched her company idea of a subscription-based payments platform, bosses laughed out loud. She fortunately quit that job. We're going to talk a little more about that. And then in 2014, launched her own company with her brother Sal Ramtula. Originally called Fat Merchant, FAT stands for Fast Affordable Transaction Technology. The Orlando company recently debuted its new name Stacks to better reflect its incredible growth and offerings. Currently, it has 12,000, and I'm sure, Sunira, you're going to tell us even more detail, 12,000 platform users and more than 130 employees. And Stacks has processed over $9 billion in payments. So that's super incredible. I'm gonna let Lauren, when she pops in, tell us a little more about her. Sunira, let's just get started. If you could tell me, for those in the audience who aren't familiar with venture capital lingo, so let's start with a quick explanation. What does it mean to say that you're a unicorn, and how is that different from being an average startup?
Amazing. Ruchika, thank you so much for having me on. I hope everyone can see me clearly. Everyone's good to go. Awesome. I'm so excited. And just, for all the audience members, I wish I could see all of your faces, and I love getting the real-time reaction. But yes, I started a company in 2014, a payment technology company, which I look back and I'm like, how the hell did I get here and start a software company? I had no experience in software. I had experience in payments. I was in the industry. And you did tell that story correctly. I pitched my idea back to my old bosses. I had no desire of becoming an entrepreneur. I did not think that, like, one, there's so much we can unpack there on why, which I do later. But I started the company in 2014, ended up scaling this company from just myself to it's over 300 team members. I think those stats are from a few years ago now. So we have 300 team members. We, have processed 23 billion in payments. We're doing 100 million plus in recurring revenue. And we just were minted as the newest unicorn in fintech, and one of the only minority women to do so as well. So I'm super, super proud of this journey. It's been a decade, so it didn't happen overnight. I have been working very, very hard. Hard work is the shortcut. There was a million challenges that I faced along the way, so much adversity, so much rejection, every single step to get here. But when you ask about what is a unicorn and about venture capital, so when I started the company, I actually knew nothing about venture capital. And venture capital is just where you take outside investments, you take dollars from outside investors that's not your funds from the company to help scale and grow your company. Not every company is, a venture investable company. So you have to have, something that's scalable. I mean, we can probably spend in the next hour of what takes, to go get venture capital. And it shouldn't be the perfect path either. I think for where we're a technology company. And at the pace that we're growing, we knew that if we got the next injection of capital to help scale it, that it would. And so we just finished closing our Series D. And so you go through rounds of capital fundraising, and you invest back into the company for growth. And that's exactly what we did. So in the last round that we did raise capital. So every time you raise capital, you have a valuation of the company, and the value is based on multiple different things. But at the end of the day, it's based on your revenues of the company primarily. There's definitely companies that are not valued, that are valued just based on ideas or like in the early stages. But as you grow, it is based on your industry, the multiples of your industry, and the revenue and the growth percentage that you have as well. So there's a lot of different factors that it takes. And becoming a unicorn means that we were valued at over $1 billion, not $1 million, not $100 million, not 100 mil, it's $1 billion. And it's really exciting. And it's not exciting in a sense of it was well-deserved. Like, it's not something that it's just this fictitious value. We are doing, 100 million in revenue. We have over 30,000 customers now on our platform. We're adding, our growth rates are in triple digits. We've been an Inc. 500, 5,000 company for several years. We were literally the top 10 fastest growing fintechs in America, top, 10 fastest growing women founded companies in America. So a lot of different things that give you that value, but it's definitely, God, it's so validating. And it's also, it's very frustrating at the same time for me. And so, Rajika, some of the stats that you shared, I'm really passionate about those stats. I mean, less than 2% of female founders ever break $1 million in revenue. Less than 3% of venture capital goes to women in business. And yes, the stats are like slightly improving, and it's so great that we raised billions of dollars in capital. But when you compare it, what was the increase from 3% to maybe 3.3%? And when you think about it, ladies, like how bad the gap is, it's so fucking frustrating because I'll tell you why, right? 3% of venture capital, where's the 97% going? It's not like we're talking about a specific industry sector or women from a specific nation or a race. No. We're talking about an entire gender that is being left out of the business ecosystem to grow and scale our companies. An entire half of the world, 50% of businesses are started and founded by women, yet less than 3% of venture capital goes to women. So 97% of the capital is going to companies that are founded by men. And this statistic absolutely must change. It must. So my excitement on the unicorn status was very short-lived. I did enjoy it. I did give myself that time period to say, hey, Sunny, you did it. But there's so much that has to change. And so I do not want to be a statistic that is celebrated by myself. I want to be a statistic that this should be the norm, not the exception.
Right, absolutely. That's really inspiring. And I think one of the problems, it's the issue is across the board, right? So when you look at the reality that for a lot of women founded companies, most of them are making less than $50,000 in revenue, right? And a huge majority of them don't even get the growth capital. There's VC right at one end, which is super, you're a sort of on a rocket ship, and there's a lot of opportunity there that comes with VC funding. But for a lot of women founded companies, and for women of color founded companies specifically, many of them don't even get that first injection of capital to when it's really important to hire your first employee, to set up your website, for things like that. And that's where we see a lot of drop off happening. So tell me a little bit about like the early days. What was it like to build, well, back in the day when it was called Fat Merchant, and now, Stats, what was it like? What were those sort of feelings? And then you talk a little bit about how, you didn't even have that tech background. Like, how did you overcome a lot of those feelings of like, is this the right thing for me? I've been laughed at. Like, how do you get over that?
I would say you don't, right? It becomes harder. Like one of the biggest myths, I'm so tired of like how entrepreneurs are like portrayed online and like this is the face of a CEO. I'm not, pale, male, and stale. Like this is who I am, right? I'm a daughter of immigrants. I'm a Pakistani woman. I'm a mother of two. And I didn't have this confidence that I did in my early years. And I wish that I did, because nothing about me has changed from the day that I started to where I am today, except for the fact that I have more experience now. So what makes us better is experience. But in those early days, gosh, Rishika, it's so hard, right? It's still hard. I will tell you, just because I have 300 employees doesn't make it easier. Complexities also rise, right? But part of entrepreneurship, it's all that journey. And every entrepreneur, every single successful entrepreneur, you could read every story on every founder ever, or listen to every podcast ever. There is adversity. And how we deal with adversity, rejection, and getting through it, you have to show up with consistency. And so it's not that it's not going to be there. When you talk about the first employee, I had to hire my first employee, and I didn't have venture capital then. I had to find a way, right? I didn't take a paycheck for 5 years.
Oof.
Okay, 5 years. I didn't take a paycheck. I was living at my parents' house. I was literally working every which way to get income that was outside of my company. I ran through my savings. I borrowed money. I mean, there was a point that I put my house on the line, right? And I stopped my life to go build this. My entire 20s have disappeared in building Stacks. I'm not proud of those things, but that is what it took for me to get here now. And so I think people miss that part of entrepreneurship. When I look on Instagram, I see people sitting on the beach and having mojitos. And now you can see that I, have a really, fancy life, and I do really great things. I take really, amazing vacations, but that didn't come, overnight. Like that didn't happen overnight. And I'm still working hard. And so hard work is the shortcut. Having the confidence to just persevere is something that needs to be part of every entrepreneur's DNA. So, yes, there's a challenge. Yes, you don't have the current funding right now. Go find the customers that are going to pay you so that you can go get your hire, right? And so don't let the rejection, the fear stop you from showing up. And when you look back at all of those entrepreneur stories who are successful, it's not because they did something super different. It's because they kept showing up. It's because they kept going. It's because they didn't take no for an answer, and they found another door, and they found another avenue. And so we have to be creative. We have to be persistent. We have to show up with our why and our purpose, and build this incredible product, service, offering, whatever it is that you're doing, with this level of passion, so that the world wants to buy from us, work with us, and fulfill that vision. And so for every entrepreneur here that's listening, I was you as well. I am you. I've gone through this. I'm still going through this. And just stay steadfast in your belief and your conviction, but show up. It is going to be hard, but the best part about you being an entrepreneur and why you're an entrepreneur is because you have the ability to solve problems. So that's it. If you have the ability to solve problems, you will be a great entrepreneur. If you do not have the ability to solve problems, then you should quit, right? Like those are the people that quit because they see the problem and they can't persevere it. So long-winded
Mhm.
answer here on that, but I'm just it's hard. Like
Yeah.
that's the reality.
Yeah. I mean, I love what you just said about, the reality of being a successful entrepreneur is that they just keep showing up. And I think often what we see around us as women of color entrepreneurs, as especially, women of color entrepreneurs, I'm also a daughter of immigrants, and it really, really, that it's sort of like you're shown one culture, growing up, and then you're expected to completely morph into this different version of you, or maybe a version of you that doesn't even exist. And you're supposed to put on this armor, you're supposed to change yourself, especially when you're pitching, when you're talking about your company. When I was starting out trying to get clients for Candor, I would go up to people and I'd say, hey, I have this great idea. And people would say, oh, this is a great idea. And unlike yours, and I want to hear a little more about your boss's reaction and how you changed that. But, I remember going up to people and I'd say, I'm really passionate about inclusion strategy. People were like, what does that even mean back in the day? And then when I explained it, they'd say, "Oh, great idea." And then I'd say, "Well, do you want to A, invest, or B, sign on as a client, or C, make an introduction to a client and people, or someone who needs this?" And then there'd be crickets. There'd be radio silence. So I'm really curious, in your, what were the no's? What were the sort of challenges that you faced, and how did you navigate them? Right? How did you navigate the
Yeah.
no's?
First and foremost, my ideas were rejected. And it wasn't like I could have gone and opened up a restaurant or a e-commerce store. Like I decided to build a payments platform. I mean, I don't even know, like I look back and my mom will tell you that I always chose like everything that was like the hardest. So I couldn't have just picked something that could have been a little bit easier. So I had to go find Mr. Visa. I had to go find like networks, and it was really complex. I mean, the financial services is very male dominated, extremely male dominated. And now I see so many, like everyone's like a fintech. Like I see so many companies now emerging, and I'm like, you're welcome, because it wasn't easy to start a company in 2012, like when even fintech didn't even exist, right? So we were financial services. There was disruption in that. I took the idea back to my bosses, and I know you really want to go to the story. So I pitched it to them. I was like, all I wanted to be was a really great leader in the company. I had no desire to be an entrepreneur. I didn't even think that for myself. And I think it's because I never saw women in my position. I like look back, and there's so much bias that our brains have because seeing is believing. And I was in an industry, literally there were no women CEOs. There was no women in leadership at our companies. Like it was the women were in admin or in support or in other jobs, but there was zero women in leadership at like in every payments company, financial services company that I worked for. And I was a finance major out of University of Florida. So it's not like I had it, and I had experience. I knew what I was talking about. I was very ambitious. I'm the same human that I was. And I was shut down, and they literally laughed and said that this idea would never work. I pitched the first subscription-based payment processor. So if you guys want to know more about my story, you can head over to my podcast, CEO School. And I think episode 2 or episode 1, maybe episode 1. I think episode 1 is my story. And there's probably several others. And you could just Google my name. And I think the last CNBC article like did a really great job of sharing even with the male boss's story. But it was complete rejection. And I just knew at that moment that I had to make a decision for myself to say, like, do I want to like accept that rejection, or do I want to find a way to go, one door closes, let's go find another. But oddly enough, I went to the other and that door closed. I went to the other and that door closed. So I faced rejection for over a year on just trying to find a financial backer and a partner from an institution perspective. But I got my first yes. Like it wasn't as like amazing as I had thought it was going to be, but it was like the confidence that I needed. It was the lifeline that I needed. And so eventually, if you do have something that is, that is scalable, that does have like that will be successful, it will find a way to be successful. And so that's what ended up happening. And, in 2014 is when Fat Merchant launched initially. And our first year, we did 5 million in payments our first year. And I literally sold payment terminals out of the trunk of my Volkswagen Beetle, door to door. Okay. convincing retailers that they should use our platform. And so you have to be willing to put in the work. You have to be willing to show up, and you have to be willing to, and getting told no to your face is so much harder. I feel like the world is so, like, all of our team members now, all of our employees, like, I'm like, even if they talk to a customer and they get a no, or one of our sales team, I'm like, you get to do that over the phone. I had to do that in person. And that's a different level of skin and experience. I wouldn't change any of that experience. I know you had a question for me that was like, what would you tell your bosses at that? Like, what would I tell them? I would say thank you. Because if they hadn't rejected it, if they had said yes, I would have been part of the corporate hamster wheel, and I would have not been here where I'm at today. So I'm super grateful for all of my experiences, all of that rejection, all of the no's, because now that has what has made Stacks a unicorn. It's a compilation of all of that. And that is what has made me as a CEO who I am today. And so I would not change that for the world.
Yeah, I love that, Samira. Thanks for sharing. And I remember back in the day when I interviewed Sarah Blakely. I'm a former business journalist, so I interviewed Sarah Blakely well before she reached the stage. And she used to sell fax machines door to door, and she got rejected from law school. I mean, the level of rejection that so many of us have to endure, and then turning that into your superpower, it sounds like, is such an incredible story. So thanks for sharing. And hopefully folks here can really sort of internalize that, what it's like. You get the no's and then you keep on moving, you keep on showing up. And so I'm also so excited to introduce Lauren Malin. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll just read a little quick bio about you. You're the CEO of Digital Undivided. Lauren is a change agent committed to diversity, innovation, equity, and inclusion. She's an award-winning marketer, prolific investor, advisor, entrepreneur, and board member with a multi-hyphenate career spanning over 15 years. She's advised and invested in over 40 startups, and her portfolio represents over $5 billion in market capitalization. Lauren, welcome. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you so much, and apologies. There's a variety of technical issues in getting into this link, so I'm so sorry to be joining you late, and to our audience. I was rushing because if anyone knows me, I am always on the stage on time. So please accept my apologies for being late. The tech was not on our side today, but thrilled to be here.
Yeah, it's great. And, Samira shared some really inspiring stories about, how she kind of got to where she is, obviously a unicorn. So what does it really mean, what does it mean to you to invest in and sort of bring up unicorns, right? Women-led unicorns. What does it actually mean for the startup ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that when we see women-owned, women-founded unicorn companies, it signals to the ecosystem not just what women are capable of, but the value that we can generate. It was once said to me in a wonderful podcast conversation that men are invested in based upon their potential, and women are invested in based upon what they've already accomplished. Yet women have always accomplished so much that defies odds, that stretches us, that pulls and pushes us out of our comfort zones, that forces us to acquire skills or to become incredibly resourceful with very little resources. These are muscles that, I tell you, they are survival skills for life, but they are also survival skills for our businesses. And even when you look at our data at Digital Undivided, you see how underfunded companies are that are founded and led by Black and Latina women, but you also see that their fail rates are significantly lower than their non-minority counterparts who are raising 10 times the capital or more as early as even their seed round. And so if that alone, as an extrapolated data point, does not show you the ability of women to build business, to problem solve, to identify opportunity, to seize the opportunity in white space, not just to see the opportunity, but actually to go after it, to implement something, to execute on something, while also still holding on to all of our other roles in life that challenge and stretch us to maintain passion, compassion, empathy, patience, if we're a mom, a wife, right? Again, these are personal skills that are highly transferable to leading a team, to asking people to believe in your vision, to treat it like our own little family at the beginning. Most startups founded and led by women will say that they treated their earliest team members like family. Where does that come from? right? That comes from learning to be a multitasking, multi-hyphenate mom. But these are unfortunately so many of the skills. And of course, not every woman-owned unicorn founder or one who's trending to be in the future is going to be a mom, but you watched your mom, or you grew up in certain circumstances where you were expected to showcase a higher level of maturity earlier on than one would have expected. I don't care if it's me and my parents who got divorced early in life or anything else that really forces us to find new backbone and to find new meaning. And that is everything that business leadership is about. The challenge as I see it is getting the world and getting men to look at these other experiences that women have had as our own kind of lived business school. We now see this popping up all over the internet. Classes, courses, B school, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Half of it now, when I was coming up in the game, 16, 17, 18 years ago in business, you really had to check certain boxes. You really had to have gone to certain schools, certain places, and held certain titles that commanded power, attention, and your share of voice. Now we look up, and a lot of the people running these courses are first-time founders. Sometimes their first-time founder experience is just in giving advice to other people, in fact, right? It hasn't even been that they had a business that advice is based off of, like myself or Sunira, who can say, hey, we've been at the School of Hard Knocks. This is what we've learned. You look up now, and a lot of these people that are teaching business productivity based on just learning how to run around, right? Based on learning how to get their message out to the world. It's right. Those are the best salespeople these days online, are the ones whose own testimony is their ability to do what they're already doing, not what they've already done. And so if we get the world to look at what women bring to the table as this superpower, which it is, and if they can learn to embrace the fact that maybe they went to Wharton or Stanford or somewhere else, maybe we did too. I didn't. I went to FIT, but I can tell you that my business and life experiences of almost 20 years of working with predominantly men who went to all of these Ivy League schools and worked at all of these Fortune 100 companies has certainly rubbed off on me. And it's taught me a lot. That is all that I can give. And what I also see women as being able to give to business and the future of business. And it's also why we see so many women being tapped now to run companies, finally, to run companies. But it's often now to come in and run somebody else's vision.
Yeah, no, Lauren, that's awesome. And I saw Sunira get off mute as well for a second. I was thinking, what you were saying. Yeah, what you're saying is so resonant with, for me, I was one of the early investors in Arlen Hamilton's backstage back when she was running the studio. And one of the things she's said constantly, which I think is something we really need to talk about, is how she says, I came for the cake, not the crumbs. And what I'm hearing from you, Lauren, what I heard from Sunira originally, is also this idea that we need to double down on the fact that we came for the cake, not the crumbs, right? We're not here to run someone else's vision. We're not here to sit behind the men or sit behind the other people. We are here, got to take up space, and we need to be recognized for who we are. Sunira, did you have something to add to that?
So much to say. I'm obsessed, Lauren. Everything you said, I feel like I've lived firsthand, and it's we're going to be best friends, by the way. And Ruchika, I also invested in Arlen Hamilton
Great.
as well. And so she's a dear friend,
awesome.
And everything she does, you guys all have to follow her.
Yes,
but
please.
What Lauren talks about, it's actually one of my biggest frustrations in the business world. I've been on social media now for quite some time, for the last almost 8 years of this journey of becoming a CEO, and from founder to CEO, becoming a mother. I fundraised while pregnant both times. I was told to hide my pregnancy. I took really shitty advice from male mentors who really did want the best for me, right? So I've literally lived everything firsthand. And so I shared a lot of my journey online, and then I started seeing and I love the digital world and how knowledge is so accessible. But what Lauren said about we're learning from people who actually have never had the experience. And so that was one of the reasons why I created CEO School, because I didn't go to CEO school, and there's actually no such thing. Where I want to learn from is from women who actually have experience, not from men with degrees in university that they don't do shit with, right? I want to learn from real experience. And I felt like that was missing from the entrepreneurship ecosystem, specifically from women learning from other women. And so the podcast formed, which is called CEO school, and now it's a top 100 femme podcast, like on the internet. So you could find it on iTunes and Spotify. And Lauren and I chatted today. I was like, I got to have you on the show. But the whole premise is around that 2% statistic that less than 2% of female founders ever break $1 million in revenue, right? And the reason why we don't even get there is the other statistics. No one's investing in us as well, right? But there's so many things, but outside of even what what we're changing, and out of our controllables and our uncontrollables is what I like to call it. There are also factors that we also need to take a check on ourselves. We should be asking for the cake. We should be investing in other humans, right, and getting our employees, right, or hiring people. We're so risk averse as women because we're such perfectionists. And so there's so many things that also hold us back that we have to just release ourselves. And that's what those are the interviews that we get to have and learning from women. And they will tell you that, like, now I sit back and I'm like, man, I wish I had the confidence on day one, but it comes with experience. But whatever, all of these women, I wish I could see your faces, but wherever you are in your journey, like, you have it, like, you have that it factor, you have what it takes. There's nothing different about me or Lauren or Ruchika that has made us extra special. Like, there's nothing extra special about us. We just kept going and didn't take that no, or like found a way. Like what Lauren talks about is like all of the men that you have all these Ivy League degrees rubbed off on her. That's experience, right? And you have to just trust yourself. And like you said, Ruchika, what Arlen said is she wants the cake. We should want the cake, right? We should want the crumbs. We should all want the whole cake because we deserve it.
I want to piggyback on this really, really quickly. I was reading an article this morning, was actually in Fortune Broad Street, about Amy Schechter. Now, I've known Amy for years, since, her first yoga company, then company number 2. And it said that she was part of, and it was interesting because I took this and I looked at my husband. We're on vacation, and I said, I'm on vacation, but not on vacation because I'm working, but that's my life. But I looked at this and I said, maybe this is a thing. And I was missing it. I was observing it, but I wasn't labeling it the way that Emma Hincliffe did today in Broad Street, which was that we're seeing a shift from women being founders to CEOs. Now, pause there for a moment, because myself, I even say, well, I've been founder and CEO 3 times, and I've been CEO now of something I didn't found myself and create, at Digital Undivided as CEO, 1 time in my career. But for whatever reason, this experience hits different. I've been saying this to women of color for my entire career, that for whatever reason, when you are CEO of something you start and found yourself, it unfortunately does not hold the same weight in the marketplace for women as it does to go be an installed CEO of something you didn't start. Because for whatever reason, we're always assumed to not be able to assimilate to someone else's culture, or to be able to run a team of people that we didn't hire ourselves. There are all of these hidden biases and stereotypes against us as leaders. And so, yeah, I've had the title of CEO several times, but it is different now that I'm CEO of Digital Undivided, that I was, kind of appointed to step in to lead and transform something that I didn't start from scratch, that I didn't have a hand in molding every step of the way. And in Broad Street today, it talks about how Amy Schechter is the 3-time CEO, but that she has been the first 2 times as founder and CEO, second time, of course, as Glam Squad, right? Which then put her on the map to now be tapped to be CEO of something that she didn't start. And that this is a trend that we are seeing among women founders, that we are now being tapped to be CEOs. Now, I say pause there, because when I step back and I look at my social circles of my dearest friends that I've come up in the business with since like 2004, 2005, 2006, my 2010 booze, my 2012 booze, those women that I've known for 15 and 10 years, so many of them are also now being tapped to go become CEOs of something else. This is a new trend. The trend used to be, you sell your company for $30 to $100 million. Sweet spot used to be about $30 to $50 million, man or woman, if you were lucky as a woman. And then they'd go off to Machu Picchu or somewhere and have your hike, or go to an ashram for a month or 2 months or 6 months if you could afford it, if your life could support that, and come back with the next idea, the next thing. Now we are actually seeing that instead of constantly looking for the next thing, finally, there's something about our leadership that's making, especially the private equity firms, say, hey, where's that founder that built that company? Where is that female founder who we could tell to now create that same transformation she created in her own company in this other business. And that's what we see with Amy Schechter and everybody, her $55 million raise that has put that company on the map. But the article was so interesting in finally calling this out, that female founders are powerful, and we are now being tapped to be CEOs of even something that we didn't start ourselves. So maybe that is our better path to unicornism. I don't know. But I can tell you that my mind has been spinning since reading that, because there are larger opportunities that maybe we aren't conceptualizing, but that we are right to say, I can build this business though.
Yeah. And I think, Lauren, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I have to say that I think this is really fascinating, because a lot of the conversation I get roped into is, are women and men, and excuse the gender binary here, are they different? Are they inherently, intrinsically different? And my answer is, the research shows absolutely not. Actually, there are very few actual biological differences in terms of how we lead and all of that. The big question is, how are we socialized differently? And I'm so glad that so many more people are recognizing that what women bring to the table as leaders, right? What we bring to the table, whether it's those skills that we have been really forced to develop, right? Like in a very male-dominated world, and certainly in a very male-dominated startup culture. And I think that's a really key part of this. So I wanted to do a quick time check. We're at 20 minutes. I have more questions for both of you. And then I would also love to see your questions coming in from folks who are dialing in. So really quickly, I think one of the key questions that I wanted to ask really both of you, and Sunir, you can go first, is about what it means to have a very fast growing startup, have a unicorn startup out of those traditional hubs, right, outside of Bay Area. I know you're based in Orlando. So what does it mean, and what does startup culture do in these fast growing hubs that are not Silicon Valley, right? What does that create for the culture there and startups there?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I have so much to say on your last comment, Lauren. I love the conversation from founder to CEO. So I'd love to go back there, because I have lots of amazing things to say there. But particularly about not being in Silicon Valley, I think it was one of the best decisions that I made for the company. Like, I would rather be a big fish in a small pond. And especially with all of the stuff now with recruiting challenges and the great resignation, like, we'd face things a lot differently than I think some of if we were in Silicon Valley. There's pros and cons. Venture capital was 10 times harder to raise capital out of the Southeast and out of Orlando, where there's barely any venture capital. And so that itself was a challenge. And we got discounted for being in Orlando. That's how it worked. Like, you literally got discounted. And what Lauren said about, male founders, and they're evaluated on potential, and women are based on what we've done. Luckily, I've done a lot of great things, but that's not the excuse. The reason why my company is a unicorn is not because we've just started and we have this great fintech idea. I have 100+ million in revenue, recurring SaaS revenue right now. And I do think that there is a massive bias, 100%, in not only for women, but also for minority founders. When we take a look at that statistic of that less than 3% goes to women, less than 1% of venture capital in total, less than 1% goes to minority founders. And if we look at women founders within that statistic, it's in the decibels. And
Yes.
So, I would say even just raising capital out of Orlando, it was extremely, extremely difficult. I ended up raising capital here locally and got, we were a big pioneer in the startup ecosystem here in Florida, and I'm super proud of it. And I love our community. But it could only also take us so far. So we also had to, grow up with where our company was scaling. And then we ended up getting capital from Atlanta, and then, now further, right? So we had to grow within that, but it's definitely pros and cons. But I think we made absolutely the right decision, because from a talent perspective, from a community perspective, I mean, we could literally call the mayor and he'll be here for another big Stacks event. And so it's really exciting to have the entire city rally around you. We were the first unicorn out of Orlando as well. I think the first female out of Florida, and it's really exciting to get a lot of that momentum. We have really great talent in some of these pockets that people don't know about, right? So we recruit directly out of the universities. We've got major universities like University of Florida, UCF, like everyone's in our backyard. And so that's a pro, but it was definitely challenging from a raising capital perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for your vulnerability. Lauren, anything to add? And then I have last 2 questions for y'all before we head to the audience Q&A. I promise I'll get to it.
There's so much to add, and we can't unfortunately make up for
I
lost
know.
time for the first 20 minutes that we were all excited. No, I think Sunira's comments are spot on. I think that whenever you are able to exceed expectations faster, you are always on the path to accelerating the growth of your company as a woman. So I think, if Sunira knew and saw that she wanted to be based in Orlando, my first company was based in Virginia in the Charlottesville region. It was much the same. I didn't raise money for my first business, but it made me the youngest self-made winery owner in the country, first Black-owned vineyard on the East Coast at that time. And then going back to the data, even our data at Digital Undivided will tell you that less than half of 1% goes to a venture capital funding, goes to Black and Latina women-founded startups. So when we look at people of color, women of color, and that double minority, and then you look even further just to Black and Latina women, we are getting less than half of 1%. And so wherever we can stand out faster is often what we need to help propel us forward into the future, just because we need the eyeballs. And I'll tell you that often women will take, whatever will help us get those eyeballs faster. Sometimes that's not always a positive. Sometimes it's, my first business, it was, who the heck does she think she is? I was like, okay, well, at least you're watching me. At least you're watching, right? So now I know what you need to see, and I'm going to show you, and I know you're going to be watching, maybe for not the reasons I'd like you to be watching, because you think I can't succeed, but my gosh, when I do, you're going to come running. And that's exactly what happened. And so wherever you can find those relationships and get that buy-in is where you should start your company.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lauren. And can I just take a moment to pause and say how inspiring it is to have 2 women of color, right, leading this panel, 3 women of color on it. I just want to pause and say, because most of the time, and I'm based here in the Seattle area, when I used to attend startup events, when I go to startup events, when I talk on panels, I'm usually I'm like I'm the unicorn where they're like, oh, look, a brown woman who can talk about startup culture and investing. Great, let's bring her in. So I just want to pause and say this feels really special. Lauren, you said something about sort of those lowball offers and taking what comes your way. Sunira, I had a question specifically for you, and then Lauren jump into, firsthand that sometimes the first offer you receive isn't going to be the best offer you receive. How do you know when to take a chance on an offer or an investment and when to hold out for something better? I think you have a good story on this.
I've definitely got many stories on this. I definitely took a big discount. I will tell you, I look back and I shouldn't have taken the discounts. I think my first angel came in at $1 million in value, right? I mean, so just imagine $1 million to $1 billion, right? And so that's one that, a huge discount in and of itself when I first started, but I needed that vote of confidence, right? So I don't regret taking capital at whatever stage I took it in. And then, we brought on some air quotes institutional Orlando investors. So they were great. They were local angels. There were some, angel syndicate groups that had come in to do our round. And it was so difficult. There's so many stories I can share of just getting to that point. But I think that value at that time was roughly around, they had come in for 7 million or 10 million. And those investors, we literally got our round done. And then we had a strategic kind of hear about us, and they came in to come partner with us. And these are all of these lessons, people, not everybody, you're just so naive as a business owner and as a woman, you think everyone's out to help you. And so I shared too much, but then they ended up coming in with an offer for a strategic buyout, and the strategic buyout offer was at $17 million. So I got the LOI for 17 million. This is the most amount of money I've ever seen in my entire life on a piece of paper. Even though it's, it was really meaningful. And for that moment, it was okay, I had just done like 1.5 round of investment. So I still own majority of the company. So this is life-changing capital for me and my team and my co-founders. And we owned as like a team almost 60% of the cap table. And so this was life-changing for us. But we felt like it's so early. Like it was just so validating that that was already there at the table. And so we had our board meeting, and I ended up presenting, we had to call a board meeting, and I presented this offer to the group, and they were like, we should pursue it. We should pursue it. I'm listening to all of these advice. Everyone, a man, by the way, of course, everyone, a white man at that too. And I'm listening to all this advice. I'm like, okay, let me try to go pursue it. We go through the diligence path, and something was just not feeling right in my gut. Right? Things that you can't, there's fact, and then there's gut, and there's things that you just cannot pinpoint. I don't have any data to prove why I don't feel good about it. I just did not feel good about the deal, about the people on the other side. I was like, I'm the one that has to sign up to go work with this company, right? When you get acquired, like I'm the one I'm not going to get all my money out. My board's going to get all their money out. And then ended up happening where they ended up sending us an offer. Like they discounted our offer to 12 million. And it was like you've got to take it or leave it kind of thing after we went through so much diligence. So I pretty much put my company on pause, like so many mistakes to go down this one strategic, didn't go through a process, didn't do anything, come back. And I did not want to take this offer at all. And it wasn't even about the value. It was literally about the humans on the other side that I didn't want to work with. And I went back to the board and I said, I'm not going to take this offer. And there was a lot of turmoil, and they wanted us to take the offer. But luckily at that time, I did control majority of the board votes, as well as from a cap table perspective. And so I ended up not doing the deal, but I was forced. They were trying to force me into taking a deal. And
Wow.
so that was at $12 million that I would have sold the company for. And those same investors, so at our time of our Series C, which was about a $250 million value, we ended up exiting our entire, like that early group cap table, and they made 18 times their money on their investment. So we made millionaires, like from that 17 to the 250 million. But I look back at, I'm so proud of myself for standing up for my gut, for that instinct. And that's the instinct that we as women have, right? There's no fact there to prove it. There's no nothing. I just knew that this was I was discounting myself. I was discounting my company. And I'm telling you, it's the hardest thing to actually walk away from hard. And they were trying to give me transaction, everything. Everyone was trying so hard to get me to do the deal. And sometimes I can be really stubborn when I finally do listen to my gut. I'm really stubborn about it. And I'm so glad that I didn't. And not only did we exited out those investors as well, but now we're literally, $1 billion. We're the top 10 fastest growing fintechs in America right now, and growing. So that could have been the end.
Incredible. Wow. What an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. Wow. Lauren, I have one more question for you, and then we should definitely get to audience questions. So I'm going to be looking out for your audience questions. All right. Okay. So Lauren, you've made the point that mentorship and access can be life-changing for women founders. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means, and a little bit maybe about your current mentees? What sort of mentorship and advice should folks here, women entrepreneurs here, be looking for?
Yeah, I think I know we don't have a lot of time left. So
I know.
for me, I think my mentees are people that I put my own equity into. I also kind of make this running joke often that I'm a really, really, really good picker of talent and ability, and of developing people into leaders and developing people into experts. And everyone who's ever been my mentee now is a rising star in their field and their industry. Folks that you read about on all of these lists, men, women, people of color. It's incredible to see that so many folks who were my mentees, because I've always been the young leader. I've always been the young investor, the young advisor, the young startup founder, the young best-selling author, like every single title. And so today at 37 years old, I mean, I have some of my mentees that are 32, but they first came to me and I was selling company number one. They were finishing undergrad. They were contemplating business school. Those 5 years or 6 years of difference, especially early on in my career, felt like a much larger spread. And those are people where my strategic support and advisory to them has been a strategic investment as well of my time. And so it's a joy to have been on this journey with so many of them. But I think that at the end of the day, mentorship is so crucial because it is the only way to close access and knowledge gaps simultaneously. You can go to school and close a knowledge gap, great, but then you have no access to the people that need to know how smart you are or all the rooms that you need to be in to get the capital for your dream, for your vision, for your company. Or you can go and have internships or other sorts of kind of relationship-based opportunities, but that don't really teach you everything because you're just doing tasks. You're not really being groomed. You're not being supported. You're not being given a seat at the table. You're not, in the meeting taking notes. You're just executing for someone on a task that is often too little or too low for them to do themselves. That's it at the end of the day, right? That's normally what my mentees end up doing. They get all excited of, I have this great offer to go to. And really they're there for the name. They're there for the pedigree of the name, especially if they didn't go to the school. But what do they tell me? Oh, they have me, answering canned emails all day. They don't have them in the boardroom. They certainly don't have them in the P&L. They don't have them in the business decisions and conversations like what you hear Sunira talking about. These are opportunities that are often reserved for the proteges. And that's kind of how I look at my mentees, are my proteges for wherever I'm at in my life, in my career at that moment in time. If I can be helpful with what I can bring to them as value, I know that in turn, I will be able to pull from them as well. So some of those mentees that I have gone on to pioneer in other industries, and I call them and say, hey, school me on this really quick. Like, I don't need to be an expert in it, but school me in this really quick. This is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I love that, Lauren. And it sounds like, there's the amplification effect, right? Like one of us or some of us start building, some of us start getting those access, and relationships. And then really there's a responsibility to build that across the board, right? It's not just, we should not be the only ones rising. It should be everyone rising. And I love that. I love how both of you have demonstrated that. So I am looking for questions from the audience. I did want to share a quick story about how I helped SoftBank launch their first program for underrepresented founders called Emerge right at the start of the pandemic. And I remember there was a lot of like mentorship, learning from like the world expert and so. But the most important thing I think that came out of that program, and especially as we were nearing the end, is the importance of capital, right? There were these amazing founders from a variety of underrepresented backgrounds, mostly people of color, founders across the country. But when it came down to it, it was like, but we need the checks, right? We need folks to be able to write checks. And I think that's something that we see as lacking across the board, right? Whether we're talking about VC or whether we're talking about that first check, right? To hire your first employee, the growth capital. So I think that's something that I really want to double down on, especially for folks listening, right? That importance of the actual money, right? There's mentorship, there's leadership, there's opening the access, opening your networks, and then there's actual money. So, to round up, I know we're at our last 3 minutes. Sunira, if you could kind of look back on your startup journey, this is a little bit of a question that I'm just going to throw out, but it usually yields the most like incredible answers. What would you say was the biggest failure that you went through, and what did you learn from that process?
Oh my God, so many failures. I hate and love this question because I'm a huge believer in failures are the best thing that can happen. Like I look back and there's been so many mistakes. Like I would say the biggest mistake that I think I look back and I make is just not believing in myself as a CEO. Like I constantly doubt myself as the job that I have today is harder than the one I had yesterday. And that's a really good thing. Like that means I'm doing something right, but I'm like the last person to give myself credit for it. And I feel like I didn't find my voice until a lot later in the company. Like I had my voice, I was building my team, probably we're about like 50 to 60 team members. Everything is, I'm really excited. And then when I brought in some like major institutional capital, I felt like I was trying to fit into a box that I wasn't. I was trying to be a CEO that really wasn't authentic to who I was. I was a man in a skirt. Like I was just trying to pretend to be something that I wasn't. And I feel like that's actually when the company wasn't doing well. And until I was like, screw this, pandemic actually happened and everyone was telling me how to dictate my company. And I think I had to find my power back to say, this is how it's going to run. We actually had a record-breaking year again during the pandemic, and growth. Like this is where like the greatest growth of our company has come from over the last 3 years. New product divisions were born because of some of those decisions that we made. And it's because I look back and it's because I actually like stood in my power, which I've always had all along. And I wish that like that was a miss. I wish I didn't try to become something I wasn't. And so my biggest advice to all the women everywhere is truly just be you. You don't have to be, there's no such thing as what a CEO should look like or should be doing. Like you define, like your experience is what matters the most, but trust your gut, trust your instinct, listen to your customers. Like, all of the things, all the pieces are right in front of you. And so just don't lose your that passion, that power, that voice. And, listen to the right voice in your head, because I was definitely listening to the one that's the critic and not the one that was uplifting. And so now, I try to make sure I give her the microphone, like the right one, the microphone. It's not that the critic isn't there, but you find tools and ways to ensure that you're dimming that microphone and listening to the right voice in your head. And so that's probably something that I look back and wish I would have done sooner.
Thank you. Thanks, Sunira. And we are at the last minute. So Lauren, what about you? What do you wish, you had done differently? What did you learn from that?
This is something I've been saying a good amount recently, but I don't think I can say it enough. I wish that I had known that every time I was so scared that it was always going to be okay. And I think it is so hard as a woman to know and to really trust and believe, especially when you're getting no's, especially when you have other responsibilities in life, that everything really will be okay. And to trust your intuition. I know Sunira spoke a little bit about that and about, her gut. I've always relied on my intuition to direct the direction in which I'm going. And then obviously just kind of sound strategy and a couple of key questions to make sure that my decision calculus is really spot on. But if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. So the biggest piece of advice that I can give, and to kind of sum it all up, is something that I say in my book, The Path Redefined, the subtitle of which is Getting to the Top on Your Own Terms. And how do you do that? I think you look at every opportunity in life, in your career, whether that's a funding source, a job, and an opportunity to acquire expertise, and you ask yourself one simple question. And that question is it worth it, even if I fail? And if the answer is yes, you go full steam ahead, because you know that whether you win or lose on paper or in the eyes of someone else, that even if you maybe don't succeed in their conventional metric, that you are still going to win in some way by acquiring skills, experience, network, pedigree, resume building, something. So ask yourself on every single opportunity, life and career, you know that everything can go one of two directions and there's many things in between. Is it worth it even if I fail? And that means fail on paper to somebody else. Because if you say yes, even if I fail in the eyes of so-and-so investor, such and such peer group, such and such alumna base, and you say, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, that means that you've already decided what your risk tolerance is, and you've already made an intelligent risk calculation to still go ahead. You can look back to when I started Gen Y Capital Partners. I said, oh my gosh, raise $30 million for an early stage VC. I've never done this before. Is it worth it even if I fail? Absolutely. I'm going to get into VC. Managing director. I'm going to learn how to do subscription documents and limited partnership agreements and drawdown notices and subscription docs. I'm going to learn how to deal with the lawyers. I'm going to learn how to deal with my LPs. I'm going to learn how to become a general partner. I'm going to learn how to create a waterfall for returning capital to my investors. All of that, whether the fund did well or not, was going to give me experience that I knew was going to mean whether I fail or succeed in the eyes of, the peanut gallery, that's experience I still want to have that no one can take away from me. So is it worth it? Even if you fail, once you have that answer, go ahead and don't be afraid.
Oh, I love that. Well, the two of you are awesome. I knew we would run out of time. And so folks, please do look up Sunira and Lauren, connect with them. They run incredible enterprises. I know, Sunira, you put out so much great content on your podcast and social media. Lauren, same with you. Digital Undivided is an incredible resource for female founders, especially female founders of color. And so folks, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for everyone who's dialed in. We appreciate you so much. Have a wonderful time, and thanks Ellevate for having us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks so
Take
much.
care.